he likens, and I think this is a great analogy, he likens drug addicts and people who are mentally ill, who are living in tents, to people who have dementia. And he says, look, their brains have been hijacked by mental illness and drugs and alcohol. And if that were your grandmother and she had dementia, no one would ever stand for her living in her own filth in a tent.
Spit that shit out, man! Now it's time to flip the script.
That's like the new gentrification line, right?
Yeah, as Lionel will tell you, that's where he grew up.
Okay.
So he will, and so all of the displaced people are moving. Mostly people of color are moving to East County, like near Gresham. That's generally where diversity now resides in Multnomah County. So it's like David Douglas School District.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know what my neighbor said this morning? His name's, let's call him my neighbor. He's a friend of my daughter's. And he comes over every morning. All the middle schoolers come over to my house to hang out before they get on the bus.
Oh, that's cool.
And he had a new haircut. He had a pretty cool new fro. And I was like, hey, dude, cool new haircut. And he's like, yeah, I went to where the black people live to get it.
Sure.
And I was like,
that makes sense.
Okay. I mean, you're black and you live here. He's like, yeah, well, I went to where the black people live.
Right. Because the barbers know how to handle that hair.
Well, of course, but like he didn't see himself as, he just saw that as a whole separate entity area. And he's mixed race, right?
Yeah.
Caucasian mother, African-American father, but he himself saw it as a separate entity, which I thought was pretty interesting.
In terms of area.
Yeah, and I just said to him, I was like, you live here, you live
black
here in this
people
area.
live
And
here.
he's like, no, but where the black people live.
Like
that's another interesting
black people,
economic issue. Because all of my black clients, all of my black friends who are all professionals live on the west side of Portland.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like deep Portland, like close to Beaverton, unincorporated Washington, Clackamas County.
And Beaverton's fair, like racially diverse in terms of compared to many other areas in Portland.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I like to go for. I mean, you can go really far east for Korean barbecue and stuff, but also Beaverton.
And I wonder if a lot of that's Nike too.
Oh, yeah. And Hillsborough.
Right.
I mean, big East Indian populations.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's frankly, in a lot of ways, it's a lot more diverse over there. When I take my kids to ice skating in Beaverton or something, I'm like, it's suddenly diverse. I'm like, this is amazing.
Costco, I popped into Costco over there and it feels much different than like the Clackamas or
so much
Gladstone,
more interesting.
Costco.
Yeah.
But, I've also I've only been here 5 years. But I feel like even in just this street alone, I've seen a change. Like the migration of people is easier than it's ever been.
Yeah.
It's 2022. No place is going to stay static. And I think it's more racially diverse in this city than it was 15 years ago, probably. And it's only going to keep going in that direction.
I hope so.
Yeah, let's hope so. We got a long way to go, right?
I think we have a long way to go. And as a professional, I mean, at least I worked at a big firm for a while. And what we noticed was we would intentionally bring in people of color. We wanted to really try to, we didn't call it this back then, but it was really a DEI committee that we had that was part of the firm, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what it was. We didn't have the terminology back then, but the idea was let's pick the groups that are most underrepresented, particularly in Portland, because we have these companies that are rightly and I think morally correct in caring more and more about what your team looks like and what do you have diversity as part of your legal team. And so we really tried to bring on, I mean, our number one area that we wanted to target diversity wise was not like it wasn't the poor. It wasn't, it was really just any black people. We just wanted any black people at all. And we would try to incentivize people, we'll pay your moving expenses. We'll bring you onto a summer internship, very well paid and with lots of perks and benefits, and hope that we woo you enough to come over here. And sometimes they would, but they would inevitably go in-house to a job that required fewer hours and was probably better paid and was probably more prestigious, somewhere like Nike or Intel or something like that, because they were also sought after there. So they were just stealing this talent that we were, I felt like we were bringing in. But also a lot of them just they hated it. I mean, they would say, nobody else looks like me here.
Yeah, it's harder.
Like, I hate this.
Right.
Where is your community?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Where do you get your community?
Yeah. I mean, they just didn't find a community. And at one point this is very bizarre for Portland, but at one point in the recent future, I had a client roster that was all Black, and to a person, every single one of them one of them has moved, but every single one of them, would move if they could. I mean, they were either here for a spouse's job, or they were here for like their job, or they were trying it out for one reason or another. They were compelled to be here. And if they hadn't already moved, they were looking to move because they were from more diverse, more interesting places like New York City, where there were other people who looked like them, and there was a culture that they felt represented in. And then they got to Portland, and I think they described it as like, I feel like an oddity.
Right. Sure.
Like, people are treating me like a curiosity.
Let's let the listeners wonder no more and get some info on who you are and your line of work.
My name's Kristen Olson. I'm a trial lawyer. I do personal injury and corporate litigation for both businesses and companies. It's all civil trial work. And I also have a podcast called Rational in Portland. And on the show, I go by the name Karen, which is sort of a dig at myself as a middle-aged white lady in the city of Portland.
And it's so interesting that you chose to name it Rational in Portland. Tell us about that.
Well,
what are you trying to say with that? Are you trying to say people here are irrational?
I have a very smart group of girlfriends, and one in particular that I'm very close to, a colleague of mine. She's a fabulous employment lawyer, and she said, I feel like your show is like canary in the coal mine kind of stuff. Like it's sort of like exposing. I think she may have used what's irrational about the city, and I said, well, what if it was just. What if we try to conceptualize the idea that the show is about rationality and moderation and common sense? And then we were on the phone with another friend of mine who's a public defender, and the three of us just sort of said Rational in Portland. And that's how we came up with it.
Right. It's so funny how that, I don't think it would, like Rational in Cleveland, you'd be like, okay, buddy.
No, I think rational anywhere would resonate because nobody's rational anymore.
No, well, that's
anywhere,
true.
Anywhere.
And these days, that's true.
And some of these crazy left-wing stuff you see in Portland, and you see crazy right-wing stuff other places.
Yeah. I mean, Marjorie Taylor
colors, Marty.
Greene. It's a great example of that right-wing lunacy. I mean, she's now apologized for it, but she was, an unabashed QAnon supporter. I mean, General Flynn, what happened to that
I know.
guy? I mean, I think my opinion is he's a mental illness or something. I mean, his belief in what amounts to sharp analysis as being conspiracy theories on the level of Alex Jones is just shocking.
Yeah, it is shocking, but I think all of that also speaks to the power of social media and the way we get information now, and then we can silo away, and by siloing away, we can go deeper and deeper and deeper. Probably what can happen in some communities in a place like Portland, in terms of you're only surrounded by people that think just like you, and you all grab each other's hand and skip further and further down that path, sometimes not even noticing how far you've gone down the path, because nobody's there to say, hey guys, nobody you respect, right, is there to say, hey guys, are we going the right way? Have we checked ourselves?
No.
Nobody
does that anywhere.
Right.
I think some people except do. Our two podcasts. That's the only place I've noticed it happen.
But, I think there's something really powerful about narrative And I know that in some of your episodes, you've highlighted people like, one of your recent episodes was a third generation Oregonian, Portlander, I think she was, who is socially liberal, but voted for Donald Trump twice. And, you sought to have a good faith conversation with her and to highlight rationality, perhaps, instead of divisiveness. And I think that loops back into like what we were talking about at the top of this podcast in terms of narrative is really powerful. And how do we change a narrative for a place like Portland, whose narrative the last couple of years is like, look, this place is crazy. How do we embrace the changes that need to happen and that I think a lot of people in good faith are trying to fight for, while at the same time lifting up a place as a place where good people should want to come and live, not as a shit show, or a place where black people should want to come and live because it's beautiful and there's the mountains and there's the ocean and there's good food. And so I've been trying to noodle on this myself personally. How do you put out a narrative that says, hey, we want you here because we think you'll make a place better. And that's what we're fighting for, to make a place better in many different ways. How do you do that without pandering? How do you do that without slipping into, ways of communicating that might sound not genuine?
I think it's just a slow process. I think we're fundamentally irrational animals, and that's always going that situation is always going to be there. So whenever emotions and reason collide, emotions prevail. Mm-hmm. That's just who we are. So, and then social media has just exacerbated that to new levels. So we just have to sort of have conversations like this. And it's just going to be like, one conversation, then the next conversation. It's just going to have to be a long process, unfortunately.
Right.
That's such a hard question. I don't think Portland's ad campaign did a very good job their last attempt.
What was their last attempt?
Oh, I don't remember the specifics, but they kind of made themselves look like the scorned boyfriend. It was kind of like, we know we messed up, but you want to give me another try?
Is it a scorned boyfriend or a girlfriend?
It could be either.
We'll call it the boyfriend.
Don't be so binary,
I mean,
Marty.
that was pretty much their ad campaign to say we're still cool, we think.
Well,
would you like to come check us out?
We're still cool, we think.
Yeah, we think.
So,
You're really looking for that affirmation.
That's so funny.
Anytime you're in a position where you have to reach out to others to say, please join our group or we'd like you to be part of our organization, you're in a really crappy position.
You fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't know if Portland's going to have that drive or draw until they figure out who they are first.
Right. That's interesting, right? Is figure out who you are. And we might be going through that process.
Kristen, who are we?
Well, I thought Nancy Rommelman, who's a journalist who was sort of driven out of Portland and now lives in New York City, I think she described it really well when she said Portland is hermetic. It's this bizarre little sealed off place. It's not, she says, and I agree with her, that it's not an international city in the way that Seattle is, in the way that San Francisco is. And I think that's part of the problem. It's a bizarre hive mind echo chamber.
She sounds hermetophobic to me. I'm just saying, I don't know her.
But can it remain that way though, Kristen? Because like we were just talking about, your neighbor on one side of you is from California. Your neighbor on the other side of you is from, somewhere else.
The person sitting next to her on the right is from California.
The person sitting next to you now is from California. The person sitting next to you on the left is from California. Like people from all over the place, not just California, but yes.
Other a-hole states like New York
have been moving here and continue to move here. So can Portland, even if some people wanted it to, can it stay hermetic? Because it's gone from maybe 2 generations ago, a different city than it is in this modern era. And part of that is informed by migration. That's not going to stop. So there might be this overarching DNA of a hermetic city. But at some point, is it going to outgrow that? much to the concern of some people, I'm sure, and to the, celebration of others, it's still a growing city.
Well, I mean, I hope so, but I think for one thing, all the people that you mentioned are white, including, no
Right.
offense, the person sitting to the right of me.
What?
Why
would I be offended by that?
Well, it's a joke. In Portland, you might be. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, it's very uncool. It's not super cool, which is why I kind of make fun of myself as by using the name Karen on the show. But I think, I mean, I wish it was a more diverse group moving here. It seems to be a group of people who can, most of whom, the ones I know, the neighbors I have, they're all Zoomers, as we would call them. They all work from home. They're not bringing business with them. They're not bringing a company here. They work for Airbnb or LinkedIn, or they have a marijuana farm, or they're not bringing, and the farm is in California. They're not bringing companies here. We will never be Seattle unless we become more business, or San Francisco, unless we become more business friendly.
But do we have to be
goal,
do we have to be either of those cities? Can we just be a better version of Portland?
I think it's tough to be an international city and not have big businesses and big companies that attract a lot of different people from around the country and different looking people.
Well, and the way people are moving now in terms of moving their business, they're not moving from California or Washington to Oregon. They're moving from California to Texas or Florida.
That's right.
And so there's deeper reasons why that's happening, other than it's pretty or I like the weather or it's diverse. It's business friendly policy as well.
Well, and the sophisticated people who have moved here from places like the Bay Area that I've talked to, like my neighbors and people that I work with, all express discontent with the idea that, we don't have a stadium. Taylor Swift doesn't come here. We don't have an NFL team. We don't have a Major League Baseball team. Our schools are garbage. We seem like a progressive place that would invest in education. Why can't we graduate people from high school? Like, what's wrong with us?
Well, I mean, California is a great example of that. They spend the most per capita on students. It's generally speaking, a progressive state with its own GDP larger than most countries in the world, and they have a horrible school system. Well,
and what's so funny is they're coming from California where that's happening, and they expect it to be better here, but it's not. And I think, and they express surprise. They express surprise at the idea that they can't take a direct flight really anywhere.
Aren't there direct flights to New York and London?
There are, just not as many.
There's not as many.
If you're coming from San Francisco,
very few.
Well, it's a small city. I mean, also, to me, that there's a plus and a minus to that, right? Because to me, I've spent the last 2 decades living in New York and LA, and great places for different reasons, but the grind of that and the times where you leave your house and fundamentally question your life choices because you're so fucking stuck in traffic or the subway's not coming. Again, great places, but there is a reality to living in those places too that I've never questioned why I left the house when I leave the house here.
Well, and is it worth having to take one connecting flight to have the benefit of not having that grind?
Like there's less flights to all those places from Austin too. It's a really cool fucking city.
Well, a lot of people go to Austin and have the same feeling that those who come to Portland feel. I have a friend who had moved his whole business to Austin as a tech business. He wrote code for hedge funds. And he's there. He's just like, I don't like it. I'm moving back.
Really?
It's
what didn't he like?
Well, he didn't like just some of the things we've been talking about. It's not a world-class city. It's a cool little liberal enclave in the middle of Texas, but it's not San Francisco. Right. It's not Seattle. It's not LA. It's not New York. It's not Chicago.
Well, and you just hit it there. I don't think Portland should ever be compared to the larger cities because it's not.
Well, at least in some regards, maybe.
We don't have a major opera. We don't have a baseball team. We're not legislatively big enough. Urban design is atrocious. I think comparing Portland to a city like Austin would be a kinder way to
I think
look at the
so.
city. And I think if
so
Portland
too.
embraced its smallness too, that would be a better approach.
I think it should, because that accessibility, that human scale, even the way the city was designed, right, in terms of accessibility, walkability, the inner parts of the city, the downtown areas. I think that really is a strength of the place. It's one of the things that attracted me in terms of just being ready for a more something that felt more human scale. And I gave something up, definitely, to come here, but I gained as well. And I get the sense from you, and you're born and raised here. I get the sense from you that in some ways you're kind of over it.
No, I'm definitely not. I'm not over Portland. I'm concerned about it.
Right.
In what way? Tell us more.
Well, I think there's an interest in being a bigger city. For one thing, Multnomah County, this is a little known fact. Multnomah County, which is where Portland resides, has the highest income tax of anywhere in the country. Anywhere. Really. And it came about most recently because of a couple ballot measures. One is the homeless tax, and one was a preschool tax. And in fact, the Oregonian, and when the Oregonian tells you not to vote on a tax, there's something amiss.
There's something big behind it.
The Oregonian, it may have come out against the preschool tax, but it certainly came out against the homeless tax. And they just said, look, this is going to be an absolute disaster. There's no metrics in place for accounting of these funds. I think when all was said and done, the estimated amount that they were raising via that tax was in the billions with a B. And The Story, which is a great local show on KGW, just did a piece on this with the People for Portland guys, one of whom helped draft that homeless measure, and said, look, the idea behind this homelessness tax was to get these people out of tents and off of streets. And it's created a homeless industrial complex, millions of which are being funneled into bureaucracies. And in fact, the people in tents are exploding. And so he was talking on The Story on KGW about how they're coming up with a ballot measure to create metrics to say that a certain amount of this tax the revenue of this tax has to go to getting roofs over people's heads.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because coming from San Francisco, and I lived right downtown. Actually, one of the biggest homeless encampments in San Francisco is,
in the Tenderloin?
No, the whole Tenderloin is a freaking homeless encampment. It's like Escape from New York, but I lived in South of Market, and so 5th and Harrison, there's the 101 overpass there, and it's just a massive, sprawling homeless camp. But having lived in San Francisco for 20 years, I've seen them throw so much money. And I was talking to somebody. I've got a cousin who's a democratic socialist, and he was commenting on social media about it, and he's like, "Yeah, if only all the billionaires in Silicon Valley just paid their taxes." I'm like, dude, money is not a problem in San Francisco. Probably outside of maybe New York, I can't think of any other city that has more money than San Francisco or the Bay Area. And they throw tons of money at it. So it's not so much, hey, we need when I hear tax for homeless in San Francisco, I think, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to just build more navigation centers all in the Tenderloin and in South of Market? Are you going to spread them out? Or because there are empty beds and empty houses that are meant for the homeless there that they won't go to because they can't do drugs in there, and they can't
here too.
drink. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they would set up massive encampments right next to big homeless centers. They would go get their food at mealtime and then come back out to their tents where they can shoot up. And I'm saying they in a broad sense. Obviously, they're not all addicts, but I think a large part of the homeless problem is mental illness and then self-medication with drugs. They're addicted out there. So many of them.
Well, the Oregonian just did a piece. We've decriminalized drugs in Portland or in Oregon, the whole entire state. But I'm thinking Portland just because it's where it's where you're going to see it the most. Maybe a fair amount. You'll probably see a fair amount of meth in places like Medford. But in Portland, you see the idea that we've criminalized drugs is loud and proud. And the Oregonian just did a piece that said, that decriminalization measure was supposed to fund treatment. And there were a couple issues with that. The first issue was Governor Brown took that treatment money right after that passed and reappropriated it. And then by the time it was able to be allocated to treatment, nobody was using the treatment services. In fact, the Oregonian looked at the data and they said that 1% of people who were I guess the idea is you give them a little fine or a little ticket and you tell them to show up in court. That's part of our decriminalization measure. Now, drug courts have basically gone away. Drug courts were a way that we helped compel people into treatment. They were, regardless of whether you believe that ultimately works or not, to the extent that there were people that were clean for a period of time, a lot of the times that was because they went through drug court and they were mandated into rehab. And now we don't have that. With the idea, the way the Oregonian explained it is it's a ticket. You have to show up in court. Half of them don't show, which makes sense. I mean, a lot of them are probably addicts. That's not really on their agenda, showing up in court for some petty fine. That's probably, and the fact is in Portland, it's not really, you're not really going to be pursued anyway. So I don't think anybody takes any of this very seriously. But half of them were showing up. And then with this ticket, there's a hotline where you can call for treatment. And apparently some of this tax, they were raising revenue to fund treatment and through this decriminalization measure, the idea was, look, let's treat addiction as the disease that it is, which is noble and makes a lot of sense to me. But nobody's using this treatment portion of the bill.
So can we have a hard conversation about requiring that? Having people with proper oversight come together and say, hey, there's a person who's clearly suffering and mentally ill, dying in a puddle of their own urine in a tent. Can we take them to treatment and force them to stay there for a period of time?
Then you're triggering an ACLU legal case.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Can we have that conversation? I mean, and
I think we should.
And if litigation needs to spring forth from that, again, with proper oversight, I'm not talking about stormtroopers walking around scooping people up off the street. I'm talking about compassionate advocates and professionals who know how to deal with this situation and are fluent with the addiction problem, understand it, and saying, okay, this person is clearly, a danger to themselves. I mean, you can put somebody in confinement if they're a danger to themselves. I don't know what the ACLU's legal leg to stand on would be if confining people who are suicidal is legal. So maybe it is illegal, and we need to have that go through the courts. But with all the things I've seen come down on this issue, that's the only one that just sort of sticks with me as, some of those people are going to come back out and be drug addicts again, but there's a certain percentage of those people are going to, that treatment is going to stick, and they might be able to turn their lives around and not be out on the street dying.
It makes intellectual sense, but I'm not familiar with it. Kristen, are you familiar with the history of ACLU presence in this realm and how that's affected our ability to handle the homelessness crisis?
Well, Michael Schellenberger, who's running for office in California, he wrote a book called San Francisco about this, basically exactly what you were talking about in this humanitarian crisis in places. He focused on San Francisco, but it's really in places like he discusses this, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, where you really see this humanitarian crisis of people just, like you said, laying in their own filth in tents on the street. It's like something out of South Sudan. It's bizarre to see in a first world country. And he says that the ACLU will fight it tooth and nail. They do fight it. And that he lays out in his book, his interviews with them, he has spoken to them, and their argument, he likens, and I think this is a great analogy, he likens drug addicts and people who are mentally ill, who are living in tents, to people who have dementia. And he says, look, their brains have been hijacked by mental illness and drugs and alcohol. And if that were your grandmother and she had dementia, no one would ever stand for her living in her own filth in a tent. So what exactly is the difference? And this woman from the ACLU, her argument was dementia is not treatable. And he said his mind was blown, and my mind was blown as he was saying that, because what's so aggravating is addiction and mental illness are treatable.
So she was saying that dementia is not treatable, therefore it's not an apt comparison.
Yeah.
But blind to the unsaid portion of that, which is that these other things are treatable, and therefore.
Well, it's their. So the argument is you're eroding their civil liberties.
Right.
And that people with dementia are literally incapable of making a choice, whereas people who are mentally ill and addicted could at any moment make a choice.
Has that gone through any judicial process? I'm sorry, Britt. Has that gone through any judicial process?
No one has had, as far as I know, and according to Schellenberger, nobody has seemed to have the fortitude or the money or the interest in seeing that through. And there's in places where this is really, the tents are really exploding and this humanitarian crisis is really exploding, like Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco. His argument is, and I think that's right as I look around, and maybe it'll change. I mean, maybe we will elect some people to Portland City Council, to Multnomah County Commissioners that are interested in getting people out of tents, but his argument is there's really no political will to do that.
Mm.
Every time I hear this and read about it, it all comes back, at least it seems to me, to the same incredibly complex issue, is that all of these people with addiction or mental illness get stuck being shuffled among different social and government and legal organizations. They're either sent to prison or they're sent to the hospital, or they're in a halfway house, or they're at some social services building. And each of those organizations has a different metric and different policy for letting them go. Do they have the mental acuity to take care of themselves? Are they no longer a threat to themselves or to society? And then they release them back out into the streets, into the public. Well, the hospital has one metric and the legal system has another metric and social services has another
And they
metric.
don't talk to each other, probably.
And there's no clear ties talking to one another, which is why you have the issue that you had 2 months ago. A guy who had been homeless and in and out of the streets and in and out of drugs for 10 years. He had been released from a social services organization, and he went to the subway and he pushed a woman in front of the train. And the family is unapologetically furious at the social system for not keeping a stronger hold on him.
Mm-hmm.
But when do you take away somebody's autonomy and say, we're keeping you in treatment or we're locking you up for a while?
When they're danger to themselves or others.
But who
How do you
decides that,
define
right?
that?
And how do you define that? It's so
it can
unbelievably
be
complex.
We already do define it. If somebody's suicidal, it's definable. That's not a hard problem for me. Have proper oversight. Not have the police go out there and decide it.
Yeah.
If you're talking about incarcerating somebody, or not incarcerating, confining somebody against their will because they're a danger to themselves or others, I don't think that's a hard metric for. Maybe even you have to have 2 or 3, board certified psychologists sign off on it. There's a DSM-5. You can do it. Just, I think what Kristen is saying is the big sort of sine qua non here, which is there's no political will to do it.
Right.
But I mean, we confine people against their will all the time for things other than breaking the law, and we could do it if there was political will.
And Kristen, we've talked about your professional background. You have a personal background that really dovetails with this topic. And as much as you're comfortable doing it, would you share that with us?
Sure. My dad always suffered from mental illness from my earliest memories, pretty severe, bipolar, wild swings of mania and depression. And so there's that piece, the mental illness piece. So I have a fair amount of experience with that just by living with him. And my mother had 2 master's degrees, one of which was in counseling. And she really focused on kids, but she certainly had that academic piece. but it's kind of like the cobbler's kids have no shoes scenario where I think, and she died when I was young. So I think he kind of like I think we all relied on her to sort of manage him. No, I know we did. We for sure did. We, including him, we all just really relied on her to manage him. And she was happy to do that, which is super dysfunctional. And he was really never interested in really getting treatment. And he was never interested in following through with medication and things like that. And if you, this is common. I mean, I heard an interview with Kanye West, who says he's bipolar, and he says that the medication like blunts his creativity. It makes him feel like he's not himself. I think that's typical. I mean, I think for my dad, it was fun to be manic. It was fun. It was racy and exciting, and it's not fun to be on pills. And it's not, I mean, I'm a lifelong therapy addict, and I do it because of what I grew up with. I go every week, but it's not fun. It's really hard. It's really hard. And so I don't blame him for not getting help. I think his brain really was hijacked by mental illness. And I think his illness was telling him, like, it's not fun to be blunted by medication. And it's painful to have to sit with not only a psychiatrist who manages your meds. You've got all these appointments. You got to deal with your psych who manages your meds, but you also have to meet with a therapist or a psychologist or something like that, because usually psychiatrists only deal with medicine, right? So then you got to carve out space to wrestle with all your demons and all the stuff that you certainly don't want to talk about, let alone like spend an hour working out with a professional. I mean, I think that's really tough. So that I had that going on. And then my sister, when she was in junior high school, was diagnosed with spinal meningitis and spent a month in Seattle Children's Hospital and almost died. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s, when pain became a vital sign. And they call it the fifth vital sign now, right? Like there's a Hulu show about this, about the opioid epidemic and the Sacklers, and it's a great show. Dope Sick. And it kind of chronicles what I watched her go through. None of us knew what was going on at the time, but she was in a lot of pain. She had a lot of headaches. She had a lot of physical pain. And the solution to that with even little kids was to pump them full of opioids like OxyContin, morphine, Dilaudid even, which is like previously that was given to cancer patients in hospice. And so when she finally came out of the hospital, not only had she missed significant periods of formative years, like junior high is hell. You could not pay me enough to repeat it, but I think it was necessary. It was like boot camp or something for life. And it was really necessary to go through adolescence in some kind of normal, horrific way. And she really never did that. And instead, she came out with a pill addiction. And they kept giving her pills until it was not okay to give pills anymore. And then suddenly everybody was onto the Sacklers and everybody was onto this opioid crisis. But by then the train had left the station. I mean, Appalachia was in a state of ruins. People across the country were suffering from these pill addictions, and their doctors were cutting them off because they knew that they would have their medical licenses taken away. They would be sued. But there was no recourse for these people. These doctors weren't following through with them. They were just they would just stop writing prescriptions. And that's what happened with her. And I remember sitting when she was in high school, late high school, just sitting in a doctor appointment with her and my mother, and the doctor saying, you have a pill addiction, and what you need is inpatient rehabilitation. And that was the first time that anybody had even suggested it. And just automatically she just said, absolutely not. And let's see, I haven't talked to her in 20 some years. She's homeless, and has always been, since she was just a she wasn't herself, obviously. And who knows who she was, because she missed all those formative years. So I don't think we ever knew her. I don't think she has ever been able to know herself. But growing up, it was, as she progressed in this pill addiction and later a heroin addiction, it was, and she had no education, really. I mean, she barely graduated high school. So there was no way to hustle up some money. And my parents were enablers, and my dad was completely insane, and she was taking their money. She would take their ATM card and just like take all their money. And then they had it at numerous times, and they would always throw her out, and she would always come back. But from the first time they threw her out, I mean, she'd just always been homeless. Even though she would come back and they would let her come back, that wasn't her home. Like, she was an adult, and the room had been repurposed. And I think they were all hoping she would just get treatment and not come back, or just never come back. I mean, I think there was a part of the family unit that just sort of felt like it would be less painful if she never came back.
Right.
Which sounds horrific.
Because there are more pieces.
But then it would end.
Yeah.
For them anyway.
That cycle would end.
Yeah.
So she's still homeless. She's still on drugs. My dad has since passed away. But
did your dad where did he go once your mom passed away? He was homeless. Okay.
So he lost the house. He quit his job. He was homeless, and I got him appointments with the best. He was up in South King County. In Washington. I got him appointments with the best psychiatrists in the city of Seattle. Most of them he didn't. I pulled very delicate personal strings to get those appointments. Most of them he didn't show up to. The one he showed up to, he was late, and he never went back, and he didn't follow any of their advice. I tried to obtain some kind of process over him, like a guardianship or a conservatorship. And the laws in the state of Washington, they're less libertarian than they are in Oregon, but it's still it's a relatively libertarian place where, hey, just because you're not taking your meds and you lost your house and you don't want to go to a psych appointment the system does not recognize that as incapacitated. Mm-hmm. If you can't house yourself certainly in the state of Oregon, I mean, look around. If you can't house yourself, that seems like a pretty basic, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It seems like a pretty basic thing, but in the state of Oregon, that does not mean that you're incapable. I mean, for good or for bad, that's our system. So there was no way that I could force him to get treatment. I told him over and over again that I was happy to pay for any kind of hospital stay he wanted to engage in. He didn't want to do any of that. Really what he wanted was for me to house him, for me to do what my mother did. What he wanted was for me to house him and just sort of care for him not in a way that he needed. Or not in a way that I thought he needed, and not that in a way that I knew it would not be beneficial.
Did you ever try? Did you ever even try that?
Well, by then I was in a different state, and I was in law school, and I had 3 jobs, and I had I had very little capacity to care for myself.
No, I get it.
Mm-hmm. When did he pass away?
He passed away in 2008.
On the street?
No, he couldn't explain this to me. But so what happened, the way I got back in touch with him was, I guess I should tie that up with a bow. The way I lost touch with him was he was calling me, he would call me and cry and talk about how my sister had taken all of his money again, or she was taking his Social Security or whatever. And I finally just said, you can only say she's an addict and you can't give her money or your ATM card or your PIN number. I mean, you can only say that so many times. She can't live with you. So I finally just said, if you are interested in getting help, I am happy to figure out a way to pay for that. I will take out loans. I will do whatever I need to do to get you what you need, but until you get that, you can't call me anymore, and lay this on me because I'm having trouble getting out of bed.
Right.
Wow.
Well, you're trying to crawl out of the proverbial bucket. You know, you're the crab trying to make your way out.
Well, and I just knew I wouldn't. Like if
Right.
those phone calls continued, I knew I wouldn't. And my therapist was like, "This has to stop. You cannot pick up the phone anymore, and your message needs to be clear, and you need to set really clear boundaries about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do." And it took years, but I was finally able to do that. And then I just didn't hear from him again because that channel of communication wasn't open, and he didn't want mental help. And so he knew that I was a dead end at that point. And so we didn't talk for years. And then when I was in private practice as a lawyer, he found me. He explained to me that he had gone to a library and asked the librarian how he would track down a lawyer. And she said, "There's actually a directory. We can just go to the directory and we can find where she is." And he wrote me a letter and said, "Hey, I'm living in Las Vegas. He was drafted in Vietnam." And he said, "I'm living in a vet's home. I haven't spoken to your sister in a long time. I like it here. I'm doing okay. They said I should probably have somebody on some paperwork. So I thought I would just reach out and see if this is your contact information." I called him immediately, flew out to see him immediately. And he was either medicated or he had a stroke, but he didn't make a lot of sense. He wasn't really tracking. He talked like he had a mouthful of marbles. So it was and he's a terrible historian, but he was always a terrible historian. And so it was kind of hard to understand how he ended up there. But through his social worker, who was also way overly familiar with my sister, I was able to piece together that they had somehow, I think for prostitution purposes, she was traveling to Las Vegas. He just sort of traveled along with her because what else was he really going to do? And she seemed to find a way to bamboozle her way into money and shelters, and not literal shelters, but some kind of a motel or somebody's couch or whatever. And he was just sort of following along on that trail. I mean, addicts are incredibly motivated. It's just amazing. My sister has never held a real job in her entire life, but somehow has managed to pay for her addiction throughout her entire life. It's amazing how she's able to generate money. So he was just sort of following along, and apparently he had some event. I don't know exactly what it was, but she brought him to the hospital and sort of dumped him there. And then he spent a couple nights, and a social worker fortunately in Nevada, just picked him up and got him housed in this, realized, oh, you're a veteran. There are actually resources for you strings that we can pull to get you on track to having a functional life. And I don't know. I don't think he ever actually got mental health treatment. To the extent he was on medication, I don't know that it was really for his mental health issues because he was so far gone. By the time I was talking with him, his brain was kind of mush. But he ended up having a stroke and dying over there. But he seemed happy. He at least seemed happy. He was living with this group of guys. He was housed. He was fed. Yeah. He had a caseworker. I mean, that was my best case scenario for him. So in a lot of ways, it was just such a godsend that he was able to get into the state of Nevada and obtain some services and get on somebody's radar.
Yeah. And is your sister still there?
No, she's floating around somewhere north of Seattle. And
is it still pills for her, or is she graduated to shooting up or anything like that?
Well, everything I hear is, fourth hand or something through various estranged family members that trickles down to a cousin that I'm particularly close to, which is sort of the only family member that I am particularly close to at this point. And she sort of relays to me that it turned into heroin just because pills are too expensive.
Yeah, I don't think I've said this before on here, but I'm just talking about how powerful this addiction is and how powerful these drugs are. I had a bank robber who He was an addict, terrible heroin addict. And long story short, we arrested him. We had him in the handcuffed to a hospital bed at Highland Hospital in Oakland. And he was laying there because they had to fix all of his flesh-eating bacteria before we could take him to jail. And so the doctor was it made me nauseous listening to him wail in pain. It was terrible. And then she left and my partner went out to make a call and I'm sitting there with him and he says, Agent Gilvaria. I said, yeah. He said, don't ever, ever, ever do heroin. I'm like, well, I hadn't planned on it, but why are you telling me this? And he just looked at me. He was 47 at the time. And he looked at me and he said, I tried it when I was 18 and I've never, ever stopped. So it was like 40 years of him on heroin.
I think it would be cold of us to go on without acknowledging how heartbreaking it is to watch these individuals, especially if they're family members, fall into the depths of becoming mentally incapacitated, whether that's through an illness or a brain injury or a stroke or drugs and addiction. All of these people are somebody's son or daughter or mother. And for you, Kristen, and for me, watching a family member have a mental incapacity where they clearly need help. They cannot function day to day on their own. Maybe even the government has approved them getting help, but they still have to accept that help and maybe they won't. It breaks your heart.
It's heartbreaking, but to me, all the more reason to have processes and protocols in place to
yes,
confine them and get them the treatment they need.
But this is why it's complex. I have 2 family members who need this. They need that help. Some of them have been approved for the help, but actually saying yes or taking the steps or calling and waiting on the hold line forever to talk to somebody with social services to connect you to the right people. It's exhausting. It's something that they're not usually able to do on their own. And there's so many people who are stuck on this addiction level or mental incapacitation level, but they're protected by family because they're not on the streets. Maybe they're in a middle class income or a higher income level. So they're not doing bad crimes and they're not ending up in prison. So there's a huge population of people at this level, but they're being supported by systems around them.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of a separate problem from people dying on the streets in a puddle of their own excrement.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about confining somebody who's living in a middle class house and being taken care of by their family and won't take their drug. I'm talking about people who are literally out on the street about to die.
Of course. My only point is that whether they're on the streets or whether they're in a home being enabled by somebody.
It exists. The problem exists.
The problem exists. Yeah. And who is the person that says, stop enabling them and you need help. And we have the right to put you in a home and give you that treatment or give you that help.
Well, and I would just say that starting at the most severe levels, which is the people in the street, that's going to pass muster like more quickly and pass my intellectual muster too in doing this, or moral muster, ethical muster. I'm much more inclined to, with proper oversight, have someone pulled off the street who's clearly going to die soon and get them the help they need and force it rather than someone who's, not on the street and not committing crimes and not menacing people.
The humanity that you're referencing, Brett, is one of the big reasons I was hoping that Kristen would be willing to tell her story, and thanks for that. Because I know that in her public stances that she's increasingly taken, she's been attacked or the blowback has been that, well, you're privileged, you're a privileged white woman, you're a lawyer, you live in a very nice part of town. It's easy to caricature someone like, how would you know? You're sitting here in judgment. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted that other side of her experience to be in the room as well, because I know that you have some pretty passionate opinions about how the homelessness issue has been handled, how we could move forward, the lack of political will or cowardice shown by leadership. And so I think in hearing where you stand on those things, it's important to know this is someone it would be hard to be more affected by this homelessness and drug addiction issue. The only way she could be more affected is if she was the one. that was out on the street.
Clearly, she's deeply involved. Kristen, I have a question for you, though, because you're very familiar with Portland government. Do you think part of the problem here is when you talk about political will, is the form of government this city uses with the city council? The Ted Wheeler is a city council member who's chief of police. That just blew my mind when I first found that out. I mean, I'm not saying he's not a competent police
and that's
commissioner
mayor,
or whatever they're calling.
For people who don't live here, that's Mayor Ted Wheeler.
Yeah.
His
Mayor
position
Ted Wheeler.
is actually just one of several city council members.
Right.
In reality,
There's not a real true chief executive, I don't think.
Can you, for people who don't live here, Kristen, can you give us just kind of a rundown of what that looks like?
Sure. I mean, Portland has made, I don't know about international, but certainly national news about its dysfunctional form of city government for years. We have, as you said, we have a mayor, and then we have a system of city commissioners. They are not geographically represented. In other words, they don't come from geographical districts. They all just come from the city of Portland, and they don't represent any particular geographic district. So we've got the mayor, and then we have all these commissioners, and they all have different jobs, including the mayor. So, she may or may not still be, but Joanne Hardesty was in charge of transportation, and I know was also the fire commissioner. And so, and Ted Wheeler was the police commissioner, and Joanne Hardesty, who's a Portland commissioner, wanted Ted Wheeler to, in the wake of George Floyd, wanted Ted Wheeler to step down so she could be the police commissioner. And then if you talk to PP Portland Police Bureau, or if you talk to the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, they will tell you that their directive comes from the Multnomah County commissioners if you're the sheriff, and also to a big extent Ted Wheeler, even if you're a county sheriff. And Portland Police Bureau will tell you that they get their orders from Ted Wheeler because he's the police commissioner. So they all have these bizarre various jobs, and it really sort of hilariously and tragically came to a head at one point of just absolute dysfunction when, in the wake of the George Floyd peaceful protests and riots, Joanne Hardesty accused the police of setting these fires, setting the city ablaze.
God.
And
sorry.
Ted Wheeler said, well, Joanne, you're the fire commissioner. It sounds like you're going to have to open up an investigation into that. And everybody covered this. I mean, Willamette Week covered it. If you Google Joanne Hardesty, fire commissioner, fires Portland, Wheeler, Portland Police Bureau, it'll pop up. It was covered by all the weeklies. It was covered by the Oregonian. So she immediately retracts her allegation and says, never mind. I apologize. I don't really think that the police are setting these fires. And Mayor Wheeler says, well, you're still the fire commissioner, and because the allegation was made, you still have to open up an investigation.
What?
And so that was, to me, in reading that, was sort of like the peak of our
Dysfunction.
bizarre
Jeez, they're just having a family
dysfunction
squabble.
Yeah.
in the state of in the state of Oregon. And I say the state of Oregon because Oregon, to the chagrin of everybody who lives outside of Portland, particularly east in the state, will tell you, and they'll tell you this is why they want to secede, that Oregon is a city state. There are so many people in the city of Portland as compared to the rest of the state that Portland really drives everything and runs everything. And when you get down to like statewide measures, like the drug decriminalization measure, et cetera, it's really Portland that drives that. It's Portland that decides how Oregon's going to vote in any given presidential election, et cetera. So bringing it back to Portland city government, there have been ballot measures to change our form of city government, to change the Constitution, the city charter, and change how it works. But I think people are alarmed. Generally, if you're uninformed about how the city works, it's kind of alarming to, I imagine, a large structural change like that, and it hasn't passed. I think now there's a lot more momentum, especially after we gained so much international attention from our, I would call it dysfunction, in the wake of George Floyd, and the way that the city was just absolutely unable to handle everything from the nightly riots to business vandalism to the mayor's own condo being set fire. I think there is some consensus that it needs to be fixed. And in fact, Mingus Mapps, who's a current Portland commissioner, thinks it should be fixed. There's also a commissioner candidate named, he's actually Ukrainian, and he's a lawyer. I think he's a labor lawyer, but anyway, his name's Vadim, and he is running against Joanne Hardesty for a commissioner seat. And he is on this, it's like a commission study. They've put together a committee to study the idea of changing Portland's form of city government. And he's on that committee, and he's absolutely interested in changing it. So we even have people who are interested in being in the government, and people like Mingus Mapps, who are part of the city government, who unabashedly acknowledge that it's problematic. Do you think that we need a city manager and et cetera?
I'm sorry. Do you think the heavy hitters in Portland are against this? Or, I mean, like you talked about the homeless or houseless industrial complex. I've noticed that in San Francisco too. They're very powerful, very powerful.
The complex?
Yeah, the industry of putatively caring for the homeless. And I think they're well intentioned, to be honest, but it's their way or no way. And if you don't get on board with that, you're not going to get elected to any government position there. And I'm getting the sense that it's the same way here. So I'm wondering if Kristen could weigh in on that. And who are the heavy hitters here, the political heavy hitters?
Well, Portland's a weird place because
that's what I heard.
We don't have we don't have that. Our heavy hitters are the teachers union. They're everything from the teachers union to, the CEO of Columbia Sportswear, to Jordan Schnitzer, to the houseless industrial complex.
Wow.
So there are a lot of different voices that I think have a pretty powerful say. I mean, we almost had a unabashedly affiliated Antifa member elected as mayor, Sarah Iannarone.
And she was really Wheeler's only opposition.
She was his only challenger.
Yeah.
And it was very close. So the idea that impecunious people in Portland don't have a political say that's false. There is a very large grassroots organizations full of people that engage in Bernie Sanders style fundraising, where it's $1 here, $1 there. And because of things like public matching funds, effectively, there are some candidates who are able to nearly double some of what they're given, as long as the donations are small enough. So if you give a small enough donation, it can equal, a 2-figure donation could equal hundreds of dollars through public matching. So you can get, that might be a great thing. I'm not opining on that, but it's just a fact. So it's not, you don't have to be a Schnitzer or the CEO of Columbia or a business economically powerful person in Portland to have any kind of say whatsoever. Anybody can run for commissioner. I mean, I think people like Joanne Hardesty have showed us that. I think people like Chloe Udali, who was on the Portland City Commission, who was like a little bookstore owner and had a special needs son and was very popular. There's still a very, very big contingent that's sad that she lost and she's not on the commission anymore. I think people like, frankly, Sarah Iannarone's close loss is a great reflection of the way that Portland politics works, and that it's really not just decided by big business enterprises. Now, the argument against that would be, and I know what they would say, the grassroots people who have less money, they would say, well, Sarah lost. And so it does show that good old boys like Ted Wheeler with Ivy League pedigrees and uber rich families are the ones controlling Oregon. But I think if you look at what Ted Wheeler's done and sort of his policies and what he says, I mean, he says he's always contradicting himself, but a lot of the time when people in Portland, when the loudest voices in the room are telling him to do something, he does it, I certainly didn't see him calling for anybody to be arrested when his condo was set on fire. Right.
Now that idea of like small money donors having a lot of power, like generally speaking, that appeals to me in terms of as a balance against big business, corporate interests running the politics of a place, whether that's a city, a state, or certainly a country. I don't know.
But it's
I just wanted to say that.
No, and I agree. But that's just the answer to the question of like, who are the heavy hitters? Well, yeah. I mean, also interestingly, the teachers have tons of power, but they're not necessarily economically powerful people individually. It's the teachers union that's economically powerful, that has a lot of power. Or for instance, I would say the homeless industrial complex has a lot of power. All these nonprofits that we're funneling buckets of money into, but individually, they probably don't. I mean, if you take any given one, they're probably not swimming in cash, but collectively, yes, it's a loud voice.
Well, that's what concerns me coming from a don't give a fuck, gonna govern my way New York City. Coming to Portland, I feel like the loudest person in the room and the greasiest wheel usually does get their way. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my perspective, that Kate Brown and Ted Wheeler just bend over backwards to whoever's shouting and screaming the loudest. And that's been our policy for the last 3 years, especially during COVID. Like you said, we saw the power of the teachers union to the chagrin of many parents over the last 3 years with the education in schools and masking and coronavirus. Wouldn't that be a sign of weakness in politics?
Well, anytime somebody, and I think it's a good argument, anytime somebody argues, no, Portland is driven by money and business, or else Ted Wheeler would not have won, Sarah Iannarone, the Antifa candidate, would have won. I think that's a good argument. I think you've just countered that. You've just answered that, which is, yes, he won, but in a lot of ways, he's effectively Sarah Iannarone. He does bend to whatever the loudest voices in the room are, and so does Kate Brown. And because Oregon's a city state, and I completely understand. I'm not a Republican. I've never voted for a Republican in my life, but I completely understand why people who are self-identified as Republicans and live in the state of Oregon, certainly people far east of Portland and in Malheur County or Harney County or any of those less densely populated counties, are really frustrated by the idea that they have absolutely no say in what happens in their state.
Yeah, generally speaking, politically and socially, I wouldn't line up with them, but I also have for a while now have a lot of empathy with people who are living in rural, especially Eastern Oregon, as you said, who are just like, this isn't my state. I have no voice.
Oh, any state really now. I mean,
yeah, well, that's what I was wondering too, is like, certainly California is driven by San Francisco, LA, to a lesser extent, San Diego, which is a more conservative city. But I feel like I'm trying to think of another state that would be like Portland,
New York,
where it's
Pennsylvania,
like one city.
Oh, well, yeah, one city. But the metro areas, the major, like you look at Pennsylvania, Philly, and Pittsburgh. That's it.
Right, but those are cities. Those cities also within them probably have a little more political diversity.
Yeah.
Because even New York has more. In New York, you have the arts, but you have Wall Street.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of a state that might be like Oregon, where it's one city that's very certainly identified with being very blue.
Colorado, maybe.
But even Denver is was more conservative, leaning, eking into the blue some now. So you're going to have some balance.
Yeah.
And
Oregon's is a great example. I'm sure it's not singular because we just can't think of it now, but wherever that exists, I can imagine the frustration.
Right.
No doubt. I mean,
I don't know what the answer to that is. Seceding into Idaho, the people of Idaho don't want you.
They don't?
I think that a lot of people in Idaho have had it with people kind of moving in.
Just like Oregonians for frustrated with Californians?
Well, when we were talking about people migrating, I actually thought and realizing like, oh, I don't like Austin or I don't like Portland.
Right.
It's, same thing with this past 2 years, people migrating to places like Boise from San Francisco and being like, oh, I actually don't like being around people that don't think just like me, or that's a smaller place.
Well, in Idaho, it's an interesting question because I got a good buddy and he loves Sun Valley. Who doesn't love Sun Valley? It's lots of fun. It's great. But he's like, we think about moving there. And again, you talk about flights. You talk about, you don't have to get too far outside of Sun Valley before it's a whole different world.
Right.
I'm not saying good or bad. It's just different. Yeah.
So is there anything happening in terms of the homelessness? Let's focus on that as we're kind of a little over an hour and we'll start to land this plane.
We've got more questions for you,
as Marty likes to say. But is there anything happening on the homeless front or any potential candidates that you've been exposed to that you like what you're hearing or you like what's being done, or in general, if it's not the homeless front, just in general in Portland and the things that you are concerned about? Have you been exposed to any ideas or people / potential candidates that you're excited about?
And you said you're not running for any office. So who do you think has good ideas?
I know she's been approached to run and has declined.
Yeah, I wish she would, but she's just adamant about it.
Well, that's part of why I started the podcast. I really appreciate everybody who's running who has good ideas, but when I talk to people seriously, like consultants and people who could have helped me take those steps, I was simultaneously reading night after night in the paper about how Dan Ryan's house was being vandalized 7 times with impunity and how Mayor Wheeler's condo was set up ablaze and they were throwing commercial munitions into it. And I have little kids, so I just really have no desire to express my unpopular opinions with political office attached to them.
You don't want to immerse yourself in that imbroglio?
Yeah. It's hard enough to do on a podcast in Portland. And I think it would be, I applaud everybody with good ideas who's interested in running for office. So some of them, Vadim, who is part of this city charter commission trying to change Portland's form of government, is running against Joanne Hardesty, and he's great. And there's another great person running against her, and his name is Rene Gonzalez. And he also has really great ideas. So she has 2, I think, really formidable opponents who are polling ahead of her. And maybe that's a sign that political will is changing. I don't know. We'll see in the ultimate election. For Multnomah County Chair, Deborah Kofori is the current chair. She is terming out. Lori Stegman, I think is her name. She is a current commissioner running for Deborah Kofori's seat, and she is a Asian woman, a diverse candidate who, and I know diversity is, as it should be, really important for any candidates who are running for office. So I should circle back and say that Renee is Hispanic and his family's Hispanic, and Vadim is Ukrainian, and that Lori who's running for Multnomah County Chair is Asian. And then there's another woman who's very interesting who's running for Multnomah County Chair also. Her name is Shariah Mayfield, and she is Brandon Mayfield's daughter. She's a lawyer. Brandon Mayfield is also a lawyer, and he won a case against the feds who accused him of being engaged in the Madrid bombing and surveilled him and tossed his house under the Patriot Act. And actually he and Shariah wrote a really interesting book about their family's ordeal. Her mother, Shariah's mother, is Egyptian and their family is Muslim. And they were it's their allegation that they were unfairly targeted because of their religion and because of his wife's ethnicity, his children's ethnicity, and his ties to the Muslim community. And she is running. She's also running for Multnomah County chair. And she believes that we should engage the current. So we currently do have laws in place that allow us to put guardianships in place over incapacitated people. And she believes that we should begin using those laws to get, her priority is to get the most dangerous people out of tents and off the streets and into some kind of form of what triaged, whatever rehabilitation they may need, get them triaged and get them really just out of their own harm's way and just sort of out of the way of the public. And she's very adamant about that. She's very clear about that. So I think we'll see. I don't know if these people will be elected or not, but there are certainly people that are voicing different ideas, and there are some really loud voices bizarrely calling people like Renee and Shariah white supremacists who are denouncing them altogether. But I mean, they're not neither white nor, I don't think, supremacists, but they certainly have ideas that are unpopular with some very loud voices. So regardless of what polling says, it'll be interesting. I'm really just interested in seeing what happens in the ultimate election, because as we know, after the wake of Donald Trump, polls, I mean, I will no longer ever trust a poll.
Yeah, same here.
2 cycles of Donald Trump in the polls.
Right. Well, anytime I hear the poll results, I think, people who still have a landline who are willing to answer their phone at dinner times say.
I thought you thought of strip clubs when you heard poll results.
Jeez.
I'm sorry. That was another conversation. Sorry. With you, AJ.
Well, Kristen, thanks for coming in and chatting. I mean, these issues are so complex.
Are you landing the plane?
We're not going to solve.
I want Britt to land the plane.
Britt's going to land the plane.
Give her the wheel.
I'm just putting the flaps down.
Okay. Flaps down.
We're not going to solve anything, right, on an hour-long podcast, but it's, again, just like I think you believe, just having these conversations is valuable, and you're so much more knowledgeable than I am on these issues, especially when it comes to do with Portland. A lot of people may not realize it, but like Britt and I live in a suburb of Portland that, despite being 8 or 9 miles away from downtown Portland, it's a completely different county and different system of government.
Even as I was driving here, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so nice. It's it's like stepping into a different country.
So all these things that you're talking about in having, what you're dealing with in Portland and what you're dealing with in Multnomah County, they don't apply to us as residents.
You mean you don't have shopping carts in your front yard on recycling day?
Only when Marty comes over.
Yeah, exactly. And a sleeping bag.
But they still matter to us, because we want what's best for the city. We didn't just move to some place that's in the middle of nowhere. We moved somewhere that's attached to a city, and a city that was on the upswing and vibrant. And there's some cool things happening here. So, it does very much matter to us what's going on in Portland. And as much as we can be a part of that conversation, I know that we believe that it's our duty to be. So anyways, that's my long-winded way of saying there's a reason we wanted you here. There's a reason it matters to us. And thanks for sharing your knowledge, your personal story, and keep up the good work with the podcast.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm a big fan of you all, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
And if you want to publish this as an episode on your show as well, I'll send you the file so you can do that.
That'd be great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kristen. It was great to meet you and great to hear your thoughts and ideas on this stuff.
Britt?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kristen. There's 2 things that we can do, and I see the majority of people doing option number 1, which is sit on our butts in our living rooms and bitch and complain about Portland. But I think the option 2 is the better one, which is to continue to be involved. And how do we do that? We vote. We go to the local homeless shelter. The one closest to us, AJ, is Father's Heart. I was there last month.
Yep.
Get downtown. You can do what I did. 2 days ago, a friend texted me and said, hey, Can you help me out and be an extra in a black and white 50s noir comedy kink scene? Filming in Northeast Portland?
Sure,
Of
you were
course.
jumping right on that one.
Again, Britt? Again?
After your stripper scene in that Korean movie?
And I said, yes, I can. So get downtown and get involved and remind yourself that Portland is weird and fantastic.
Yep. Amen.